Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe. Today we're going to be taking a look at another one of my most requested weapons, one that is regarded as one of the best in the game, the Amprex. Now the Amprex was released back in update 13.1 into the Energy Lab in the dojo, and initially led to quite a few confused players, who were already using the Synapse as one of the strongest weapons of the time. The Amprex came in with a base damage of just 7.5 pure electric damage, which makes it the lowest damaging weapon per shot of any weapon in the game. However, it more than makes up for this by having the joint highest critical chance in the game, equal to the Synapse and the Dread, of 50%, with a critical damage multiplier of 200%. This amazing stat leads to a 125% critical chance with just the point strike mod on it, allowing for red crits. Now what this means is that without any crit damage mods, it increases the crit damage multiplier from 200% on a normal crit to 300% on a red crit, although this increases a ton when you start including the Vital Sense critical damage mod. In addition to the critical damage, the fact that the Amprex is full electricity means that it fuses extremely well into any elemental combo that you wish to put on the weapon, which is absolutely amazing and really increases the damage potential of any weapon. The Amprex also comes with a base status chance of 20%, meaning that a status build is definitely a viable option with it, and is in fact stronger than on any normal weapon. The lack of any physical damage elements to the weapon means that with a higher status chance you can really focus on your elemental procs more, since you don't have to worry about the RNG proccing slash or puncture, when all you want to do is proc magnetic or corrosive, really allowing you to focus the Amprex. Now the best thing about the Amprex is that I've not really talked about its strongest feature yet, one that works together with the awesome crit chance and the decent status chance: the way that the weapon deals its damage. When the Amprex fires, it sends out a stream of energy from the weapon, much in the same way the Synapse does. However, when it hits the target, it forks out and branches between enemies. What this effectively means is that while the Synapse does awesome damage to a single target, the Amprex can apply its damage more efficiently and over a wide area, taking down whole hordes of enemies in a single trigger pull. This makes the weapon extremely efficient, and the reason I love status on this weapon. Spreading those status procs around literally couldn't be easier. Now all of these features couldn't come with a couple of downsides to keep it in balance. Firstly, because of the fact that the weapon arcs between enemies, it does mean that the ammo consumption of the weapon is pretty intense. And without burst firing the weapon and keeping an eye on the consumption, you can run yourself out of ammo pretty quickly. Ammo mutation does help with that, but it's another mod slot used that you can barely afford to lose. Another downside of the weapon is actually a fault that I've levelled at every crit based weapon, that after you take the necessary mods into account, you can only ever have 3 or maybe even 2 mod slots left to do anything with. Really limits the weapon in the roles that it can perform, and putting support mods on the weapon really isn't that feasible. The final downside of the weapon that I feel limits the Amprex is its range. With a base range of just 18 meters, it's not long at all. Now you can increase that with the use of Sinister Reach, however, as I just talked about, mod slots really are premium on a weapon like this, so increasing the range means cutting back elsewhere. But it is an option if you feel that you want it, although personally I would recommend a decent long range secondary weapon rather than losing another mod slot. Okay, so we've had a look at some of the features of the weapon. Let's move on to how we're going to mod it. Now it doesn't come with any polarities as standard, so we're going to add 5V in through Former. Now for the majority of our builds, the mods are going to remain the same. We've got Serration for damage, Split Chamber for multi-shot, Heavy Caliber to further increase the damage, and the accuracy loss really doesn't affect the Amprex in any way whatsoever. And then we've got our crit mods. We've got Point Strike for crit chance, and Vital Sense for crit damage. Now, for this build, we're going to go with a more status-oriented build. We're going to go with Malignant Force and Rhyme rounds to bring up the viral damage, and Thermite rounds, which is going to combine with the electrical damage on the weapon to bring up the radiation damage. Now, because the 2 mods here are an elemental combo on their own, these first two will always combine and create the viral damage. And because thermite rounds is on its own, it will combine with the electrical damage of the weapon to bring up that radiation. So for the corpus, we're going to take advantage of the base electric damage on the weapon, so we're going to go with high voltage and rhyme rounds to combine with the base electric damage to bring up magnetic damage, and then we're going to go with malignant force, which is going to bring up the poison damage for the fleshier units of the corpus. And then for our void, we're going to go with corrosive and heat, so malignant force and high voltage again with the base electric, and then thermite rounds on its own for the extra heat damage. Now there are a couple of things you can do with the weapon if you wish. If you want to get rid of the extra damage mod, you could always put in the arrow mutation, or you could go with sinister reach to increase the range of the weapon. But as I said earlier, you are going to be losing that other mod slot for the weapon. Personally, I like being able to control my control the weapon and to control the ammo consumption myself. And then if I run out of ammo, I just use the large ammo restores to help with that, rather than losing another mod slot and losing more damage on the weapon. So, onto my recommendation as to whether I feel the Amprex is worth the time, effort and resources in building. And the answer is pretty obviously yes, it's absolutely worth it, even if it's not a weapon I actually like myself. The Amprex deals out serious damage over a reasonably wide area and can be absolutely devastating in the narrow corridors of the Grineer Galleon or Corpus ship tile sets. The status procs that this puts out means that it is hugely effective. It's almost an AoE weapon with massive crowd control potential and very, very focused damage and status. In terms of the damage it puts out, it's easily in the top portion out of all the weapons in the game. Probably at least top 5, even though when you look at the stats, it goes from the lowest base damage of any weapon in the game to one of the most damaging. The Amprex really is proof that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and the stats of the weapon only tell a fraction of the story. Now I know people are going to be surprised at my answer that, even if it's worth it, I don't like it. The Amprex itself is a fantastic weapon. It's hugely effective at what it does, and is one of the top weapons in the game. My problem is that while the arcing from the weapon is pretty theatrical, I find the gameplay fairly boring. Much like I do with the majority of beam weapons, I have the same feelings about the Synoid or even the Synapse that came before the Amprex. There is more of an element of skill with the Amprex to control the ammo consumption, but it just has no satisfaction of going into a room full of people and mowing them all down, when the Amprex with a 2-second burst could kill the entire room with very little effort at all. This is not a problem with the weapon. In fact, it just shows how effective and how efficient it is. It's just not that it just doesn't match my own style of play. The Amprex is a fantastic weapon that deals with the majority of enemies with ease, and I highly recommend it, but only if you feel it suits your own gameplay. Don't try to force yourself to use a weapon you don't like, and just use what you feel is fun. The biggest cause of burnout is when people say constantly Bolter Prime is best, Synoid Gamma Core is best. And to be honest, us YouTubers are guilty of that as well. And then people feel that just because they're the best weapons in the game, they feel forced to play with them, even if they don't really like them. Just remember that with enough time, effort and a few forma, the majority of weapons are good enough to deal with the majority of situations that you're going to run into in the game. Don't try to force yourself into use something you don't like. But in essence, looking at the stats, you wouldn't think the Amprex would amount to much. But beneath that unsuspecting cover lies a weapon that deals with crowds unlike any other weapon in the game. Well worth the addition to anybody's arsenal. As always guys, many thanks for the support. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.